All right, welcome to the March 9th AdCom. So we are continuing to go through warrant articles. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. We've got 3 citizen petitioner articles, 16, 17, and 18. I am taking them slightly out of order. So we are going to start with Article 18 first. So for that, we have John Schlebeck on, who has submitted a petition for direct mailing notifications on town warrant articles. And just so the rest of the AdCom knows, I've also invited the town council, Pat Costello, on only because I've gotten some more legal type questions on this and I'm not the guy to figure those out. So with that intro, John, if you want to talk about the article.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. And I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to all the AdCom members. I appreciate, and I think a lot of people appreciate your your volunteer actions to be on that committee. And thanks for putting up with people like me in advance. So I'll start out on this particular warrant. And just rewind back to the special town meeting in November, where there was what I consider to be a truly transformational proposal regarding zoning, and that was the accessory apartments. So I spoke to no fewer than 50 people in town prior to the town meeting, and a total of 1 had any remote knowledge of that warrant and what it entailed. So that said to me that, we've got a total failure here in advising the residents of the town what's really going on. And the old methods are just not working. The newspaper doesn't have the circulation it had. People aren't reading it. Billboards, whatever, Facebook, it's just not effective. So, when I look at when this was brought up in the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I'll paraphrase Bill Keegan, he said, typically we notify abutters, and that's exactly my point. We were ready to, to basically allow accessory apartments on every abutter around my home, and there was no requirement that I be advised. So I think it's really, hypocrisy that, in a single vote, we could absolutely change the character of the town and have serious impacts on individuals and neighborhoods, and there's no obligation to let people know. I know that there'd be some pushback as to, well, this is going to cost more now. And, the point I would make around that is, we already do mailings as a town to our residents. We mail about schools. We mail about water quality. We obviously mail out census requests. I even remember getting unsolicited mail-in ballot for an election in 2020. So, there's precedent for this. I also think that it would allow for efficiencies. Rather than having things linger out there as to whether things are going to be on, have a warrant that's going to be voted on or not, this would kind of force people to be organized, make sure that we know what's going to be on, a minimum of, at least 60 days in advance to allow for that mailing to go out and allow people to have an opportunity to evaluate what is being proposed.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions. I thought, John, it might help if I also shared the actual item. I'm going to share my screen, Alexa. So I will, there's the item, and I'll open up to questions from the rest of the AdCom. Anybody? All right, I'll ask some questions.
I had a quick question on how would we define impacted? To all impacted residential property owners?
Correct. So, if there was something that had a global impact, obviously you'd have to mail to everyone. If there's something that, was related to, something that was in an R15, then the people that are in an R15 would need to get that mailing.
So it's a discretion of somebody in the town as to who's impacted or not. Town employee, okay,
Correct.
understood.
This question is for Bill Keegan, but so there's a 60-day prior to the town meeting. What's the typical timeline for warrant articles to close before a town meeting? Does that already fall in line?
Well, I know he's on, but he may not be there to answer. I know we typically publish and send it in to the printer a month before the town meeting-ish. There's
Right,
Bill.
so in terms of notification, we would at least, we typically get the warrant, the selectmen sign the annual town meeting warrant around April 15th, and the town meeting then gets posted. There's a requirement under the bylaw that I think it's at least 14 days prior to the annual town meeting, which actually begins with the election, not the actual town meeting itself. So it's really like 21 days prior to the meeting itself.
So what's the impact on the town to meet a 60-day requirement where it usually does a 20-day to a month type of timeline?
Well, with going at least 60 days, that would mean that we would have to do a specific mailing just for that. So where I think what John Schlebeck was referring to is that we actually do send mailings out, but it's usually on a cycle with, say, water bills and you can't really send a notification with a tax bill. You could do it with a water bill. Legally, you're not allowed to do that. But and then as far as schools, you can't really just send it to school people because obviously there were other people be impacted by that. So we would have to, if there was an article that was impacting a zoning article that was affecting residential properties in, say, the R15, as was pointed out, we would have to identify every household in those R15s, and that would require going through the assessors maps to identify all those properties and then send notification to each one of those individuals. That's not an easy task because zoning lines are they actually go through certain properties and can go into other zones as well. I suspect you'd probably just send it to them anyways. But it would require somebody sitting down and actually outlining those various zones and then picking those individuals and getting their mailing address, which, by the way, is not always clear either, because the individual that we would send it to, we would send it to the person who we would send the tax bill to, which may not always be the person who resides in the property, because there are situations where people rent property and they would get the notification sometimes. Or they would be a person that would be most impacted if they've been renting there for quite a long time. So it would go to the owner of record on that particular property, and only those that were identified in that particular zone.
Yeah, I think, Bill, what I was calling out as well is that it would be both the owner of record and any registered voters residing at that address.
Yeah, it would have to be registered voters, right? Because that would be, because there are situations, of course, where that not everybody's registered who lives in a property, in a residential property.
Right.
So I have a question that's probably for Bill. If some folks were missed that potentially, should have received the mailing, and the best efforts was sent to everybody that we thought it should go to, but in fact, a few folks were missed. Something, passes, and folks come forward and say, well, I'm objecting to this. You've got to rescind it because I was entitled to be notified and I didn't get notified. From a legal perspective, is that something that could cause a lot of issues?
I'm going to actually have Pat Costello respond to that question because it's a legal question. But my sense is that this is not a requirement under zoning under Chapter 40A. This is a notification that's being requested by the community to the residents. It would not, from my understanding, would have an effect upon the actual zoning, the actual vote being taken. This is a notification to let people know that that's being taken up. And I think you said it a few minutes ago with your point, Marla, it's best effort, I would say, because there's gonna be people you're gonna miss. That's just the way it is. It's, of course, nobody tries to do that, but there could be a number of different situations why you could have missed somebody. And the mail didn't get delivered to that particular household. Somebody threw it away. There's a whole bunch of different things that could have happened in that respect. But I'd rather have, as a legal question, I'd rather have Pat Costello respond to that otherwise.
Sure, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. There is an analogous provision in General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5, as it relates to non-residents of the town who are entitled to notification of proposed zoning amendments. And it does provide that if any such non-resident wishes, he can specifically request to be mailed a notification of any proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The statute also provides that the failure to receive such a notification is not fatal to the process, is not fatal to the procedure whereby the bylaw would be reviewed and approved by town meeting. I would suggest that if this type of a measure were to be incorporated into the town bylaws, either as a general bylaw or as a zoning bylaw, it could go either way, in my view. There should be some very detailed language therein that would describe or specify some of the very points that are raised here tonight, i.e., what is an impacted property? How would an impacted property be defined? Secondly, is it the mailing of the notice in and of itself that would satisfy the requirement of the bylaw? Or is some sort of acknowledgement or receipt confirmation required? These are the types of things that bylaws have specific language to address and eliminate any ambiguity. And I'm sure that the Attorney General's office, when looking at any proposed bylaw to this end, would look at those very points to make sure that there isn't any, well, let's call it fatal ambiguity within the body of the bylaw that would cause them not to approve it. But as Bill noted, the mailing directive can be implemented in a number of different ways, and we would have to be very cognizant of the process by which it would be implemented in the town, and what would be the case if someone who was deemed to be entitled to receive the notice either didn't receive it due to failure of the postal service, due to relocation, moving from one address to another. There are a number of different circumstances that could arise. And as I say, this particular article requests that the town accept a mandate. It doesn't per se seek adoption of a bylaw to this effect, which I think is a critical distinction. But in the event that this were to be implemented in the town, I would most certainly recommend that it be subject to a very carefully and thoughtfully planned bylaw with appropriate language.
If I could just raise a question with John, and first of all, I should have said this from the beginning. It was good to see John. I know we spent a lot of time earlier in my career in Foxborough, so while you were serving on the committee, I was always able to, and you served as a very good member. I just wanted to, you started out by saying that there weren't a lot of people at the town meeting because a lot of people weren't even aware of it, which is an issue which towns all across Massachusetts have been struggling with. Many of my colleagues as managers across the entire Commonwealth have been struggling with this issue for quite some time now because newspapers just aren't in circulation the way they used to be. That used to be the number one thing that people used to read and go to for trying to get notification on these issues. But I mean, you make a valid point that, that we're trying to do the best we can to get the word out, but we're not always successful in doing that. I think that there's something to be said about the fact that sending a mailer to everyone about a town meeting or a special town meeting would seem reasonable to me to make sure we at least take that step to let people know that the warrant is going to be addressed at the town meeting, and then directing them to the town's website to look at the individual warrant articles and see how that may affect them. at the end of the day, I think we all could agree, perhaps maybe we don't, but I think people go to town meetings when they feel they're affected by them. And some people just go because they appreciate the process. But more often than not, when people read through the warrant, have the opportunity to read through the warrant and say, hey, this may affect me, at least they'll try and call out and ask questions about things. And if they're not interested, any kind of notification you send them just isn't going to matter anyways. But I do think that something could be done. I think it's fair to say that we should do a mailer to folks for town meetings and special town meetings, particularly because I would agree with you that, trying to get people to town meetings is not an easy task.
Yeah, and Bill, I agree with you. By the way, it's good to hear you too. I can't see you right now, but miss your voice, right?
There you go.
But, I agree 100%, right? That participation is certainly down. But, my personal experience was not that people didn't even know that there was a town meeting. They just didn't know that there was an article on there that could profoundly impact them and their property values and their quality of life. And, some people just had incredible reactions to that. So, my interpretation of the reactions is that, quite frankly, had that article gone through, there would have been a lot of blowback on it. So I think there's, this is something that could be beneficial to a lot of people, not just the folks who are getting the mailing, but, I talked about earlier, create some efficiencies here, be better organized in the town. I mean, I personally think, for me to get this warrant in, I had a deadline, and the deadline was in February. To see it be late February and, watch a planning board meeting and hear people talking about, whether there was going to be this particular bylaw, voted on again, this warrant, if there was a backdoor way of getting something in. I took exception to that. Again, I'm not being treated equally. And, when there's a developer or an individual that wants to do something on a piece of property, the onus is on them, I think, to find out who the abutters are and to get information out to the abutters. Now, I can't speak to what happens if someone is missed in that process as well. And I don't know who's policing that, but, maybe you can talk to that as well, Bill.
Well, in terms of zoning changes, zoning articles are usually addressed by the planning board and the planning department. And then usually if somebody does request in a situation where it requires a butter notification, it is incumbent upon the applicant to gather the information from the assessor's office and then send notification to the abutters based on a list that's provided to them by the assessor's office. So that is the process. And with respect to how this would be done in this particular instance, this is a little more tricky because once you identify the if you're impacting a specific property, it's much easier to identify the abutters based on a specific property. Whereas you're in a zone, that zone, and it's interesting because there are zones that actually are located in different parts of the town. So you may have an R15 in the south end, you may have an R15 in the north end. So they're located in different areas across the entire community. So it's a little tricky. I mean, I'm just saying that from a logistical perspective, not arguing about the merits of your request, but more from a logistical perspective, it is tricky to try and pull this off.
I mean, personally, I would just go with the blanket mailing. And not try and finesse it and figure it out. But, that option is available if you want to go that way.
Fair enough.
Well, it's not clear entirely to me what all options are available. So Pat, can we come back to what the actual implications are if this passes? I mean, you talked to it before, but sure. I would like to hear it very clearly.
Yeah. Yes. And, let me be clear. I mean, my position is not at all based on the substance of Article 18. I mean, there are communities, I represent a town, in fact, where every citizen of the town is mailed a copy of the warrant. It's in a bylaw. So, I mean, this is not an unusual request. But as I review Article 18, it doesn't propose a bylaw. And as I noted earlier, it could be implemented as a general bylaw. It could be implemented as a zoning bylaw. It could be implemented by a planning board regulation. It could, the mandates that the article is proposing that the town accept could be put into effect in any number of different ways. And I just think that the article as drafted isn't specific enough to provide notice to voters of the town that this is proposing a bylaw amendment. There's not enough information or not enough specificity within the drafted petitioned article to incorporate it into the bylaws in any way, shape, or form. As discussed earlier, I think a bylaw of this nature would, in my view, be entirely legal and permissible, but it would have to have a lot of work go into it in terms of removing ambiguities, describing with specificity what are impacted properties, what types of zoning bylaw amendments would be subject to this particular direct mailing process. There would be some work going into it. And as Bill noted, typically the planning board and the planning department of the town take the lead on zoning bylaws. And even if it's a petitioned zoning bylaw, if it is submitted in accordance with the statutory requirements of Chapter 39, Section 10, it goes to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen are required to forward that zoning bylaw to the planning board, refer to the planning board for a public hearing. It would be subject to public hearing. It would be subject to public comment and perhaps revision or amendment to the proposed draft bylaw. So there is a process already in place under Chapter 40A to work zoning bylaws through the system. Another approach, short of a petition under 3910, would be to lobby your town officials, i.e., particularly the planning board, town planner, to propose a bylaw along the lines of what you're looking for, or give them a draft and they can work on it. So there are ways to do it. I don't think that this, as I said, Article 18 as drafted, I don't think it can be implemented as a bylaw because there's just not enough meat on the skeletons, if you will, just to fill out a full bylaw with all the descriptive terms and language, procedural language that we would need. What I view it as is an article that, by all means, could be presented to town meeting could vote on it, and in essence give its sense of the meeting to town officials as to how the town voters feel about this particular concept. That's how I would view Article 18. Non-binding advisory type article.
I would like to
Go ahead,
I
Jack.
would like to thank John for bringing this up, because what we are dealing with is a century ago, the newspapers were the primary means of communication. That's not the case today. So now what do we replace it with? Well, there was a suggestion earlier tonight that, we send people to the town website. Well, in a few minutes, we're going to be dealing with the question of electronic signs. And so a person on Elm Street might go to the town website, and there he would find there's a billboard advisory committee. It lists the members, it lists the contact information. It doesn't tell you that the billboard advisory committee was disbanded 2 years ago. So it may be that at some point, the town website will be capable of that task, but it's certainly not today. I get over a dozen mailings from the town in the course of a year, including school department things. I don't have a child in school. Certainly, that's a practical way. It's not the only way. Enough.
John, quick question for me. This is Paul. Can you talk a little about the 60 days? I sense, based on your comments, you want to enforce some more rigor. I just don't know. I don't have a gut feel on 30, 45, 60, 120. You know what I'm saying? Just
So the reason I put that in there, Paul, was that, if there is something that, people need to get organized on, it gives an opportunity to do so. Again, I said, I think tonight, as we sit here, we don't still know which warrants are supposed to be on the, at town meeting. And, some of those could be hot button items for some people. And I don't think that, I'd want to reach out to somebody now and say, there might be this warrant, because I've lost them at that point. What do you mean there might? Like, there is or there isn't. So this is not trying to, as much as I wouldn't mind, this is not trying to address all the warrants, that might be at town meeting. It's not trying to pull those forward. It is trying to pull forward anything that, as I said, is like a residential zoning related bylaw or regulation, or things of that nature,
got it. Okay.
That would impact property.
That was a very helpful clarification. All right. Other questions from the committee? All right. Well, I appreciate you coming and presenting this, John. Welcome back briefly to the committee, which again, you chaired, which as you know, was a lot of work. So I appreciate you still being involved and coming back to talk to us about this.
Yeah. And Paul, I appreciate the opportunity as well. I want to say too, I'm not a lawyer. And I appreciate, I think it was what Pat was saying, obviously I could make this into probably 5 or 6 pages long, which, was not my intent. Yep. But one thing he did say was that, this could be put into effect in many different ways. And I think that onus would be, on the town leadership should this pass.
I agree with that. Yep. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Pat, you should feel free to drop off as well. I appreciate your time and willingness to step in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My pleasure.
No lawyers on the AdCom, and we can talk ourselves into circles on this stuff. All right, I'm going to go on to Article 17, which is an easement. Hello, Bethany. Wait, there. Sorry.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry, I got the wrong one up there. Yeah. I don't know that I need to show this one. I can show the actual easement map if that would help you.
Certainly.
Yeah, so because Marlo sent me something. Let me know if it's,
Okay.
let me know if that's not the right one.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. All right, so you want an easement and you have to come before the town to get it. Is that the upshot on this?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm a trustee owner of the property at 28 School Street, next to Judy's Flowers, and we're doing some improvements there, and which includes upgrading the septic. And unfortunately, due to the lot size, a septic is not able to be installed. But with the addition of the new sewer line on Market Street, I've been working with Paige in the planning department and Bill Buckley. And we've come up with a proposal for an easement through that back lot, which was recently acquired by the town.
Yep.
And is planned to be demolished and a parking lot put in. So we're hoping that the timing will work out and we'll be able to run a sewer line from the property in the front all the way to the back. As I understand there were connections put in for each of the addresses on School Street as well.
Okay, and who pays for that?
So we would be paying for the application and the installation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll open that up to questions. Or any comments from Marlo? I know he looked at this.
No, I don't have any comments. She explained it well. I think you also said that you did talk to Lance in the highway department. I did reach out to Chris Gallagher a couple of times to just get his input or confirmation, but it wasn't able to reach him. But just speak to your discussions with the highway department.
Yes, so we sent this proposal over to Gabby in planning and also to Lance in at the highway department. And his response was that he had no objections. There was some talk, I guess, in trying to keep some of the trees that are on that back lot as a buffer to the businesses next door. But that would probably be part of the actual application process. Some of those trees are, he thought that they should probably come down and be replanted. And they're all like sort of trees that have just grown up. They're not, there were no intentional plantings there. So they're not in a straight line or anything. And his concern was that the roots might infiltrate the pipes at some point if they're too close. But the actual placement of the line would be determined in the application process.
Okay.
And Paul.
Yeah.
I am on.
Hey, welcome back.
I was out of town this past weekend, Marlo. I sent you an email just with some thoughts on it, but I was late getting back to it. So I am on tonight. From the town's perspective, we did install that sewer line down on Market Street a few years back. The intention was that housing authority property would get a new building on it, but that is not the path that has gone. As Bethany has said, that will be demoed by Doug King and a parking lot installed. There is a sewer service, a stub, out to the property line for that 15 Market Street property that could be utilized by her property and the property she's talking about for this easement. So, one of Marlo's questions was typically these sewer requests come from the DPW, but this property is already in the sewer district. So they don't have to request that through town meeting. They're already involved. So they have the right to connect to sewer. So it is just the easement that needs to go to town meeting and get a vote from town meeting for.
Got it. Thank you for that. Anybody else? All right. Thanks, Bethany. Thanks for coming and talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for dropping in like that, Chris. Like phone a friend. All right. I'm going to move us on to article number 16. So this is South Street Sidewalk. So I'm going to pull that up. But in the meantime, I believe Bill King is on. Sorry, that's article 17. So Bill, if you want to talk a little bit about this, I'll pull up the article so everyone can see it. Bahaha. All right, I dropped off for a minute. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, Paul.
Yeah, I dropped off for a second. I got a notification to watch out for my 40-minute limit, which I know was not a right notification. Mr. King, would you like to talk about warrant article number 17? I wonder if he is on mute.
Bill, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, we can't. He doesn't look to be showing up on mute, though, does he?
Yes, he's on mute.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
I think there might be a problem because I found myself unable to communicate. And even though my computer said it was okay, this was 5 or 10 minutes ago.
Ooh,
so there might be a broader issue.
Mr. King, I'm gonna ask that you actually just log out for a minute if you can hear me, and then dial back in on the Zoom. Let's see how that works. Okay, why don't we give that a second? I'll go ahead and pull up the warrant article. So Jack, it muted you out briefly?
Yeah, I actually logged out and logged in again.
Oh,
because the various things I tried didn't work.
can anybody see if he's logged back in? All right, I'm going to give him a few more seconds, and if he isn't able to get back in, I'll move on to the next article. But given the next one, I think is going to take a little bit of time. I want to give him a second here to get back in.
Is there a telephone number to dial in that we can hear people? Is there a number linked to the Zoom at all?
Don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I've been clicking on this save bookmark for so long, I don't know the answer. So this is something that doesn't happen live, right? In person at town hall.
That's right.
All right, I don't see him logging in. I'm gonna move on to the next one, and then we can come back. The next one.
Oh, he just came on.
Of course.
He just came on. He just came back on.
Yeah. I made it happen, Bill, just by saying
There you go. There you go. You wished it. You willed it in. Mr. King, are you back on? We're not. Yeah, you're actually okay. Go ahead. Can you speak? Can you speak now, Mr. King? Okay.
Dan, you have his cell phone number, right?
I'm not sure if it's his cell phone number, but
Or you got a number.
do you want me to give him a call and?
Yeah, we'll move on, and if you could give him a call with my apologies, and we'll figure out if we can get him back in.
Oh, there's a phone number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still going to move on. So I'm going to move on to. Oh, wait.
There he is.
There we go.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Okay, Mr. King, if you could talk about your warrant article.
I'm trying to get an extension on the sidewalk from Paulo Lane up to North Grove Street. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
we can hear you. I've just pulled up the warrant article so people can see it.
The sidewalk ends just at the corner on the other side of Paulo Lane. And from there up to the South Community Center is a bad corner. And there's a lot of people trying to maneuver that corner who are out walking, exercising and bike riding. Makes my skin crawl when I see cars coming by at 40 miles an hour. And a lot of people try to navigate it going on the other side of the street so they could face on to the traffic that are going south on South Street. And when
Are they walking and jogging on the street? Is that what's happening?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
And when they face onto it, they want to see what the cars are doing. If nobody's paying attention, they want to take evasive action. And on the other side of that guardrail, there is a drop of 10 feet. And there's no place to maneuver over that guardrail. So it's suicide on that side. So on the other side is the safest part, but their traffic is to the back of them, and they're not comfortable with that. So a sidewalk would be a lifesaver. from what I've seen, accidents right there at that corner. My neighbor's daughter got broadsided when she came out, and the mailman got rear-ended there at that corner, and he got injured. And there was almost a head-on collision there at that corner not too long ago. There's been a lot of activity at that corner that I don't know how nobody was killed at that corner yet. So it's a very dire strait to get that sidewalk in. And the South Community Center itself has got like meetings every night. And there's probably 50 to 100 people there in the meeting. And they, some of them are local that would like to walk, but they can't because at nighttime there's no sidewalk. And that corner is a death corner. So I'd really like to see a sidewalk go in. That would make a lot of people happy.
All right, I'm going to open that up to questions. Thank you for walking us through the article.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
not really a question, but just I talked to Bill yesterday. He's spoken with all the neighbors. It seems like he has the full support of everybody in that stretch. He mentioned that a lot of times he has people with their dogs or their pets walking on everyone else's grass just to stay out of the road. The $75,000 number was based on a calculation of how many feet, approximately you would need versus the costs per sidewalk, which was just estimated at or somewhere around $1,000 a foot or similar. So a little worried about the high speed traffic, and then the reason. I'll let Chris speak to this in a little bit with how the actual land is set up, but there is a little bit of work to do. Bill is right. You can't really put it on the what I would consider the outside of the street. You can't really put it on the guardrail side of the street. It'd have to be an extension of the sidewalk, which is on the inside of the street going down South Street there. And there would need to be some work done to shore up any sort of sidewalk that would go there. So not an easy project, but he's spoken with he's done all his homework and spoken with all the people in that area. So I don't really have any other comments other than that, and I just kind of wanted to address those in case anybody was planning on asking questions in that direction.
Dan, that's $100 a foot, not $1,000.
Sure. Yep. My bad. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jake.
All right, that was helpful, Dan. Any other questions from the AdCom? No?
But Paul, I'm all new to this process.
Yeah.
So I assume there's a process to evaluate where we should put sidewalks on and a budget for that, or, roads and sidewalks. I don't know if they're combined. Would this be on the top of that list or be part of that list? It sounds like we need to appropriate $75,000 above anything we have for other purposes for this specific thing. So I'm just trying to understand the process, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, so typically this would go through the CIP, the capital process. We would see it. And so this would be appropriated outside of that normal process. And I know Chris and Bill are on the call. They can add anything they would to that.
Sure. So and you go with me, Paul?
Yeah, go on, Chris.
A number of years ago, we went through a complete streets prioritization plan process where we picked up, approximately 40 projects ranging in price of, $100,000 to $400,000, various gap closures in sidewalk repairs, a lot of maintenance, some intersection redesign projects. We also went through an ADA compliance plan where we looked at every sidewalk in town, every intersection, anything that had a vertical granite curbing at an intersection, is on a plan to be redone through that process. We also have our pavement management plan, which has been ongoing for the better part of the last 10 years now, where we prioritize roads based on their condition, what the repair cost would be based on our budget, which currently we have Chapter 90 funding. We do have some meals tax funding over the years. The last 2 years have been without that through the pandemic. So the funding source right now that we have is Chapter 90, and that's approximately $620,000 annually is what we're getting from that. So we are also in the process through the same engineering firm that does our pavement management, looking at a sidewalk management plan that would combine both the ADA compliance plan, the complete streets prioritization plan that we have in place, and put together a recommendation and a process for not only fixing the sidewalks that we have, but filling in some of the gaps that are safety concerns like this.
Chris, real helpful. Thank you. Was this on the plan? This area of the street? I guess I'm thinking, are we going to hear from some other resident on another street about why they need something? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is this outside the process?
I'll try and address that for you, Mike. It's a fair point. So the Mr. King's, based on the merits of his request, I don't know, nobody will argue the merits of his request. The issue that causes us some concern is the manner in which it's being requested. We currently have literally miles of sidewalk in town that we have not been able to maintain, that we're in the process of trying to differentiate between the priorities of just maintaining the existing ones we have. Building new sidewalks is not even on the table right now. That would be something that we would be doing once we completed the renovation of the existing ones, and then we'd be looking to maybe build new ones as the need would arise. Mr. King's request, as I point out, has merits based on the issue that he has. But for us to say that to then start addressing individual requests was similar to what happened when we did when roads were being done years ago. And it turned out to be, okay, whoever showed up at town meeting would want to get their street paved. That's how it would get done. Well, of course, as you know, that was not a very good system. And what happened was that streets that really didn't need it were ones that got addressed first, but it was because they had brought more people to the meeting. So that's really not a good way of doing it. It was best done through a pavement management program, which was implemented about 10 years ago. Is the way that's being done, Rich, across many communities nowadays, is because what it does, it prioritizes the condition of the road, and then you build back based upon the condition of the road, based upon and you put money into that program. There's multiple ways in which that can be done, but obviously the worst ones are getting done first, and the better ones are not being done last. And this is a case where
you had to provide the town and the state with a traffic study showing if there had been any impact caused by the billboard. And if they did find that there was any effect on traffic, that they could enforce adjustments and even the elimination of the electronic billboard. And all the billboards during that pilot program had to do that. And they found that there was not a significant amount of issues that were caused. Matter of fact, they found that there was none on the Route 1, so that they allowed it. So there had been traffic studies on individual electronic billboards during that pilot program. And within the zoning decisions, they also put in there that if the police chief or the town manager find that the billboards are causing any type of issues, traffic or otherwise, that the Board of Appeals can bring the owner of the billboard back in front of them to reconsider it and consider additional conditions in order to take care of those issues.
Yeah, Frank, the search I did wouldn't have turned up the specific ones that you just referred to. But what I did find is there was very little, and there was not a strong case against it. And one of the things when Chief Grace was in to see the advisory committee several weeks ago, I asked him about that. And he said, well, look, distracted driving from cell phones is much more serious than the possible distraction of an electronic sign. So, and that's essentially what I'm seeing is the case against it is at best unproven and maybe zero or near zero.
I tried to share my screen with everybody. Can everybody see mine?
we can see it. If you could maybe blow it up one click. You've got the plus minus at the top.
Yeah. Is that better?
There you go. Yeah, that's good.
So very briefly, the red that you can see along 95, that is the only, and then further down where the interchange with 495 is, those are the only areas that are possible under the zoning for a billboard. Now, what they've also done is they've put a location, again, on East Belcher Road and at the DPW, and they've done the circles there. Those two can go in, but nothing could go in between them. But then if you go further south from DPW, you'll see there's a couple of little red areas. Now, the one that's further down, that's close to the interchange, is too close to the interchange, but also I know there's wetlands down there. But there's a possibility that one could go down. Now, if you go further down to the interchange with 495, on the Mass Premier side, you can see that there's the off ramp from 95 to get on 495. So that area could not cause, could not have a potential billboard. But on the other side, you'll see there's a little bit of red. And the northern part of it may be able to hold one. I still think it may be too close to the interchange, but someone would have to go out there and really measure it.
What's across from Mass Premier, Frank? I can picture one side of that intersection very clearly, but not the other, that other bit of red.
Well, if you go on 106, you go under 95,
yep.
And then right to the right, I forget the road there, but that goes into, that's the back way going to Mansfield Park.
Okay, there's there's a suburb over on the right there, I think.
There's a commercial building right there.
Is there? Okay.
And that's what you see, the red kind of goes through a little bit. That's a commercial building.
Okay.
And that's awfully close to the highway, the interchange as well. So
exactly. So I don't think anything could go there, but if one could, it'd be on the other side, and it'd be at the very end of that lot. But again, you'd have to really get out there and measure it. And again, Attorney Byrne, I don't think one could go in there, but you'd have to really measure it.
What about the one near the lodge, Frank? There's a small area right near the lodge?
Well, it's not in the lodge because the lodge is residential, but correct. To the north and to the south and to the north of the lodge, which is right outside that circle.
Yeah.
There's a possible location there. And then also to the south of it, but to the very south of it on that red area, I know is wetlands. So it'd have to be, kind of close to that building. And as you can see, there's a parking lot right there. So there's a possibility of that something going there, which I think is stronger than down by the interchange with 495.
Fair enough.
So if I had to give my personal guess, there could be 3 locations, possibly the 4th one, but I think it's too close to the interchange.
Is everybody okay with this? I'll unshare if that's okay.
Yeah, you can unshare that, Bill. Thank you. I have some additional questions, but I wanted to open it up to AdCom first. The rest of the AdCom.
I have a slightly different question. I'm curious how the 300-foot restriction to a residential unit was determined, and what does that mean? Is that a proven distance to restrain light shining through somebody's window? Or I wouldn't want to hear from a resident like a year later that you put a flashlight in my front yard. I don't know what 300 feet in one of these billboards means, whether that's sufficient, it's been proven, tested, or what it means in our case here. But how's the 300-foot been determined?
So 300 feet, as far as the impact goes, maybe Attorney Burke could address that question, because he's had direct experience in dealing with these boards and how it impacts the abutters to the area. Can you speak to that, Bob?
Sure. So the state requires when you have a permit that's approved at the local level, through the state approval process, all abutters within 500 feet of a proposed sign location would be notified for that public hearing. Generally speaking, with bylaws, I haven't seen many restrictions with regard to distance from resident neighborhoods. This is rather unique. I've said to both Barney and Lorraine that I thought that the bylaw that Foxborough has written is the best that I've seen in the state as far as a comprehensive bylaw. I think that the 300 feet was considered in large part for the DPW facility, which is a rather unique opportunity, because in this instance, Foxborough would not only benefit from the mitigation package from the billboard advertiser, but also sits as the landlord, which the ongoing, I think this would be a consideration for the advisory board. The ongoing revenue stream could be enough to make terrific improvements to the existing DPW facility. So I think that that distance from the residents was considered with regard to that property.
So I'll get a couple of questions, and then Bill, can you talk to potential revenues per billboard? I realize that it's a broad question.
So it's purely an estimate at this point, and I don't know, but it's based upon the percentage of the take of actual revenues per year. And I've seen estimates go out as many as 30, 35 years. And Bob, if you, the agreement you had in Kent, is that 30 or 35 years?
We have one that's 35. The first one, I believe, was 30 years. Okay. I would say that each town and each situation is rather unique. We did one, the most recent one, there's one going in on Route 24, but the most recent one was at the intersection of I-95 and 93, which is perhaps one of the most busiest intersections. I can't say in the state, but it's certainly a very busy intersection. And each mitigation package is a little bit different. There has to be, I've spoken to Mr. Keegan about this, there has to be the proper balance between the money paid to the landlord and the money paid to the town so that the advertiser is still actually making money. But I do think that it's a significant amount of money for the negative impact on the town generally.
And it's we're talking millions of dollars in terms of impact, in terms of revenue. Is that correct, Bob? Over time.
Yeah, I think in the instance with the DPW facility where you're both the owner of the property plus also the mitigation package, I don't want to get boxed in on numbers, Bill.
No, fair enough. Yeah, that's right. So, I should have clarified that. But as the owner of the property, it would be in the millions of dollars, right?
Well, I think if you look at a capital plan for making DPW improvements, thinking optimistically, I think that those type of improvements could be funded with a building that the town actually owned, along with the mitigation package from the advertiser. I think that's achievable. And again, each town's a little bit different. The economy's a little bit different as well, too. Considering this right now for Foxborough, I think is a good idea because there will be more signs that go up between Sharon, Walpole, as was mentioned, and then down towards Attleboro, towards the Rhode Island line. As there's more signs that come up, then there's less opportunity for revenue. So I think the timing for Foxborough is good on this.
So I didn't hear anything close to what I felt like was a dollar number per year or per billboard. So just for perspective, when I used to have IT projects report into me, they would give me a T-shirt size, and small T-shirt meant like $100,000, and medium T-shirt was like, $1 million, and large T-shirt was like 10 million or more. And I don't feel like I've got even that here. So is there like, and I understand there's even like, there may be people involved in the negotiation who are on this call. I would like a broad sense of whether we're talking, a few $1,000 a year, 5 figures per year, like what? You can tell me what Canton gets, right? It'd be public record. What
Right.
Canton, gets per billboard per year. And I recognize it would not be a perfect analog, but still.
Well, I don't have that information readily available to me. However, and each one's a little bit different, but I don't think it's unreasonable that a town-owned billboard with a mitigation package plus being the landowner, I don't think $100,000 per year is totally out of reason complete for both of those. So that's a 6-figure.
But
think that's
don't forget, it's over 35 years too. It's 35 years. So it does get into the millions of dollars when you add that component into it. And particularly when I say that, because the land itself is the most valuable piece up front for us. So it depends on how you structure the deal based upon, this is what I've been told and how how it is structured. But that we're actually trying to retain someone who would actually negotiate this for us. So that this is not a negotiation I have any experience whatsoever in doing.
Yep.
So we would want somebody that would have a skilled negotiator in this area who understands that work and would want to help us negotiate that.
Mr. Chairman, I just pulled the Town of Canton Annual 2019 report, and there's a paragraph in there that states that the negotiation included a $125,000 annual minimum amount. And that's what I could quickly do on pulling an official Town of Canton document.
And that started in when, Bob? Was that 2010?
That would be the Royal Street. That's the one on Royal Street at I-95, I-93. And that, I don't want to mislead this board that mitigation package is for a project that I don't believe Foxborough could command that kind of money, but I don't know. I think whoever you choose to be the advisor to the town should negotiate the best possible deal. I've seen $25,000 aside as a flat fee. We're doing Route 24 right now. That's $25,000 aside, and that's because there's 6 or 8 billboards along 24 already, and Route 24 is not the same as I-93 and I-95. So I'm trying to be forthright, but I also want to be realistic that particular billboard, it's actually owned now by Outfront. It was sold to Outfront. It's considered an Outfront Premier. If you go by it, you'll see Outfront Prime, I'm sorry. So it's one of the greatest revenue generators in Massachusetts. Dunkin' Brands has their corporate headquarters there, as does the former Reebok, which is now the Tufts Health Plan is there as well too. So when you look at those, they pull quite a bit of advertising dollars.
Okay. So I recognize again, there are multiple people on this.
And that mitigation package also has a minimum, but it also has a revenue sharing as well too. And I've talked to Mr. Keegan and told him that I would work with him on getting more information.
Okay. All I was going to say is I recognize there are parties on the call who are going to be having conversations down the road. I was just trying to get the ballpark because the topic of revenue did come up. So I wouldn't stretch that over 30 years when talking about it would be my preference, because enough years and anything hits the millions, but I just wanted to try and at least get the ballpark. Lorraine, is there a public hearing on this as well, or how does this work? Like, how does this go through the zoning board? I'm just not familiar with the process.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
This is sponsored.
This isn't zoning.
Okay.
So it's not a required.
Got it.
And again, we worked with the zoning committee, so we came forward telling them that we were going to put a citizens petition together. And you guys had that discussion earlier about citizens petitions. What I always encourage people to do is meet with the town, tell them that you're thinking about doing that, working with them to write it up, even if they're not in favor of it, so that you can write it up so that if it passes, they can live with it. Because a lot of the citizens petitions aren't worded, we'll say, the best way they could be coming in front of town meeting. So we started working with the zoning board of appeals, because the billboard committee was disbanded and the sign bylaw was kind of relegated to the zoning board of appeals. They worked with us in writing it. They didn't give us, a yay or a nay on it. They just said, we work together. And, Mike asked about the 300 feet. When we put the initial draft together, that area was left blank.
Right.
Because there was a lot of discussion with regard to the distance. What should it be with regard to the distances? For example, the site on East Belcher Road, the closest residence on that side of 95 is over 1,200 feet away from the location that the sign would be. But on the other side of 95 is a residence that's approximately 550 feet or so. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, So we had to work with that, with all the different locations and all that. And it was finally, agreed upon that everyone could live with the 300 feet. It went back and forth. So
I misunderstood the process, so thank you for clarifying that. All right, I'm going to throw it open one more time to the rest of the AdCom.
So is it fair to say too, Frank, that if an application for a billboard comes in following the approval of this bylaw, not a zoning bylaw, but a bylaw, or a sign bylaw, rather, that the next that the process would be in front of the ZBA for administering the permit itself?
Correct.
Yeah, if it first has to be approved by the Attorney General's office.
Right.
Once it's approved, again, just like any other sign, it has to go in front of the Board of Appeals, and it is a special permit, special sign permit.
Right.
But it is not under zoning; it's under a separate general bylaw. So all it requires is 50% for approval.
We have referred on several occasions to the ZBA role. I would like to hear Lorraine's take on that, since she's representing ZBA tonight.
Sure. Well, so the sign bylaw, the bylaw itself gives authority to the Zoning Board of Appeals to administer that. And so the board is presented with requests from individuals who are seeking to have a billboard, for example, and work with them to determine what, go through our regular review process and determine whether or not that permit would be granted. And so we have 5 members of our board. 3 are regular members. 2 of us are associate members. 5 of us are involved in all the discussions, but the 3 regular members, when they are present, they will vote. In the absence of any of them, an associate member will step in, and our vote has to be unanimous in order for any kind of permit to be granted.
And question for the, sorry, go ahead. A question for Bill or the town moderator hat. Is this a 50-50 vote, or is this it is a 50-50 vote? Okay.
It is a 50-50 vote because it is not a zoning bylaw.
Got it. That's
I
what I
think
was
Frank
wondering.
pointed out earlier.
Yep. Okay. Okay. I am out of questions. How about the rest of you? All right. Thank you, all of you, for showing up at night, and glad you got to hear the citizen petition part.
When we send out the potential billboard map, so everyone can get it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to give myself. I don't want to speak for Lorraine, but she also knows it very well, as does Barney over it, in case there's anything that's confusing about it.
You did just remind me. So is this going to get posted somewhere publicly before the town meeting, that particular map?
It's up to the administration, but they could put it up on the website, I suppose.
I just feel like if we're going to talk about it at town meeting, right, it'd be good if people had access to the map. So.
Yep, that's a fair point. Fair point. We can put it up.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
There's nothing to hide here.
Thank you.
No, I didn't think you did. I'm thinking ahead.
No, it's a good point, and we want to try and get it out to as many people as possible. So.
Trying to make the recommendation at town meeting, and I don't have a map, so just wanted to make sure. All right, thank you, everyone.
Just so the members know that the map you'll get is like the third version, because we've done different versions looking at different distances and things like that, and the board has really been working on it to again limit the number of billboards and the locations so it has the least amount of impact.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. In a minute, Bill, we will jump to the town manager, just the update I asked for on revenue and free cash. I wanted to real quick to the rest of the committee, marijuana, the two marijuana ones were on and are off again for this meeting, but we will talk to them next week. I mentioned in the email, I wanted to remind everybody there will be the committee meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. They will be looking at this. So if you want to get a preview of it, you can watch the planning board meeting tomorrow night. And I think it's other than clearing up old new business, I think it's the first thing on the agenda. So good thing to listen to while you're eating dinner. Put it on the background on FCA TV. All right. So, Mr. Town Manager, not sure George is there.
Maria's here. And
okay.
George is there. There he is.
George.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will proceed from here. And Maria, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen with regard to the chart that we want to explain to everyone tonight. Tonight, our goal was to provide you with an overview of where we are revenue-wise and budget-wise, and sort of explain the free cash position that we have, and also where we are overall right now. And for some of you new members, particularly, to try and explain, how this all works. And some of you, I don't even think were here when we first did the presentation of the budget early on in October. We did what is known as the Financial Summit, which is a meeting between the selectmen, the advisory committee, and the school committee, where we sort of lay out, where we've been and where we're going over the next year. At that point, it's particularly helpful to know where we were. Excuse me, how much free cash we'd achieved during the past year, and how that's derived. And I'll get into that in a second. But I think it's really important for you to know that meeting is really important, because it sort of sets the course for the next year. It also helps us in determining if we have money that we need to spend in the fall of town meeting. We have the ability to tap into free cash, provided it is certified by the Department of Revenue. But at this point in time, we want to just give you an overview of how we've derived the finances for fiscal 23 and where we are. By the tax levy itself, we've come from a budget of $55,988,060 in fiscal year 22 to a $58,121,108 FY23 estimate, purely based upon the 2.5 levy increase that we're allowed to by state law, as well as the any new growth that we've achieved during the past year as well. And so, giving that combination of those two factors alone provide us with 3.81% increase over fiscal year 2022. For state aid, we're carrying about $167,353 more, or 1.96% increase. And that's purely based upon, I believe it is the governor and the House estimates at this point in time. But the Senate is still to be determined. I don't even know if that's just the governor's revenue.
Just the governor's.
Just the governor, yeah. The House
bill,
is not come out yet. That's right. So the House and Senate versions are still to come out. And then the fourth iteration of that is you have the governor's version, the House version, the Senate version, and then you have the conference committee version, which is a combination of the House and Senate meeting together to agree on what the final numbers will be. And that's the number that ultimately gets shared between the cities and towns. And so we're still 3 steps away from determining what that number is. So, but at this point, it's fair to say that we are about 2% higher than we were last year, net of all the expenses that go on that number. That comes out, that's going to be, we're 2% higher overall where we were in terms of fiscal 22.
And Bill, when does sorry if you said this already, when does the state have to certify or finalize that number?
Well, ideally it's June 30th, but I've seen it go as late as September or October in some cases.
Yes.
When they can't realize.
Every year we have to make an estimate, right? And roll it forward. Okay.
We do. And we don't live or die based upon that number. As you can see, if we were to use the fiscal 22 number and just build our budget accordingly, you'll see that we're really not going to be off that much anyways, either way. If we view it that if the state comes in with a higher number of state aid, that's actually better for our bottom line, but it's not something that we build our budget based upon the number that they provide. So in terms of local receipts, this has been an important number for fiscal year, the past few fiscal years. Particularly, this is the area where we were hurt the most with the shutdown of COVID-19. That affected our stadium revenues. It also affected our meals tax and hotel motel tax, which are really good streams of revenue for us and really can help us and really impacted our ability to our free cash position during the past few fiscal years. We are going into fiscal year 2023 with a position that we're going to increase that our local revenues by $617,000 over the fiscal 22 number. And the reason why we're taking that position, of course, we know that revenues are increasing, meals tax are increasing, hotel motel tax are increasing, but more importantly, the revenues from Gillette Stadium are going to increase again, hopefully back to the pre-2019 levels. I just saw tonight the proposed schedule for events at Gillette Stadium, and it's easy for us to relatively easy for us to predict what's going to happen with revenues as it relates to the Patriots and the Revolution, and of course playoff games play into this as well in terms of additional revenue for us. But it also is a particularly helpful for us when they have concerts at the stadium, because that revenue is probably the richest form of revenue that we receive from the stadium, because ticket prices are higher as well, and the revenue return to the town is higher as a result of those tickets, as well as the fact that they tend to sell out more often, and the take at the gate is pretty high, as well as the take from the meals tax as well, and the surrounding restaurants are affected by that as well.
So, Bill, I apologize. I'm going to keep interrupting only because I remember what it was like 2 years ago when I was new to the AdCom. So just to break down Gillette, we get a fixed dollar amount per football ticket. Is that true?
That's correct.
$2.50, I think, maybe per
not
per
even
ticket.
quite $2.
Not even.
Believe yet.
Oh, okay.
We're getting close. We're getting close to that.
It's $1.70. Okay. And then when we have actually, same for the soccer team, same for the Revs.
I believe the soccer is a higher revenue as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I feel like I look at that, but. Yeah.
And then the other events, we don't get a per ticket, or do we get a share of the revenue? Or you don't have to know specifics. I'm just trying to give everybody the general background.
So every ticket that gets sold there, the town gets a portion of those tickets.
Got it.
The challenge is that football tickets, believe it or not, are one of the lowest numbers of the tickets. Not the concerts and soccer are actually better for us. And at special events, for instance, lacrosse, they have a motocross event. They have. I'm sorry, what was the other one? George?
I think that was George.
Hello? So say what?
No, I was just talking about the different types of revenue that we receive from Gillette. The different events that occur.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it is higher for the motocross and the the thing. I'm gonna say this. I'm not gonna say it's exactly this amount because I'm not holding the paper in front of me, but I'm saying it's around 170 for the football tickets, but it's closer to 3 for the concerts.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a much better number, much better fit for us in that respect.
Okay, and there's a minimum as well, right?
Yeah.
There is, yes. The minimum is about roughly around 1.5 million that we're guaranteed if no events take place in the stadium or no tickets are sold. So, because let's not forget that football still has a fairly good television revenue source that comes back to the teams, and so as a result, we're guaranteed a minimum amount of money regardless of whether or not anybody's in the stadium or not. It's in terms of fans. I mean by that.
Bill, do we get any cut of any alcohol revenue from these events?
We do, yeah. Meals tax is meals includes meals and alcohol sales at any of the restaurants in town. Period. So that it's any restaurant in town, any meals that are served, any dining in types of revenue that comes in, that goes to the state, then comes back to us in quarterly payments throughout the year. So right now, I think we've collected 2 quarters. We're looking to see the third, and there'll be a fourth one coming in right before the end of the fiscal year.
These ticket receipts are on this payment in lieu of taxes line. Is that it?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
This is what is known as the pilot payment, and and that's the way that the revenues are derived from the stadium in that regard.
Thank you.
Does everybody understand why we do that? Because actually, the deal that was struck back in 2000, the year 2000, I believe, was a payment in lieu of taxes because the stadium's actually built on town land. All right, so that's the reason why we get that payment. That was negotiated back with a group of folks back in 2000, and that deal is good for, I believe, up until 2050, if I'm not mistaken. So it could extend even beyond that if necessary. The Gillette Stadium has just announced that they're doing about $250 million worth of new renovations to the stadium. It's great that they're doing that because it actually makes the stadium more attractive and a better venue for different events. But the only real revenue that we would derive from that construction would be the building permit itself. It doesn't increase. We don't pick up another dime based on the value of the improvements because because the stadium's built was built on a structure, so it's a pilot payment in lieu of taxes event, so our structure. So we would not collect any more on the value itself.
Phil, does that add any seats to the stadium?
It does not. It does not. The indication is that they are going to maintain the same level of seats. They may have more covered seats. They may have more event space as a result of that. But they do not have. They're not adding seats. And most stadiums around the NFL right now are not adding seats, primarily because they realize they're competing against high definition TV, and as a result, they're not, unless it's an enclosed stadium. The limits on outdoor stadium venues is what you see what you get for the most part at this point in time. I know that there may be more seats, say in the new Las Vegas stadium or even in the Minnesota stadium. And then this new stadium just was built out in Los Angeles, which was about a $5 billion project. That stadium itself has all the seats are covered, and so they do have multiple areas which they can hold events there. It's pretty versatile stadium in that respect. So, other areas in which we provide revenue to the town for supporting the budget are in the areas of the ambulance fund, the recreation revolving fund, the overlay surplus. And overlay surplus, just for everybody. So let me just explain. The ambulance fund is the funds that are collected through insurance claims that are anyone takes an ambulance ride is charged an insurance is charged their insurance. That money comes back to the town, and that gets placed in an ambulance fund, which then helps support the fire department, its vehicles, and even its staff to a degree. The recreation revolving is all the events that they hold in recreation are a fee-based program. So the money goes gets collected for the programs and gets turned around and then paid to the staff with the exception of the director, who the director is paid for by taxation. And that's the only person paid by taxation in that department at this time. Overlay surplus is really what is known as sort of like before we start the budget each year, we set aside a certain amount of money that is sort of sort of like a hedge against the amount of taxes that we collect. If we were to be short, that amount of money is set aside for that purpose. Or if we have if the assessors have a situation where they've overvalued a certain particular property and a person files for an abatement, the money would come out of that. Rather, I take that back. If it covers the overlay surplus would come out of that, but also things such as veterans like veterans exemptions and discounts would all come through the overlay surplus. So we end up with that additional money, and that's usually runs about $1.5 million per year. George, am I right?
Well, right now, for the last several years, we've been doing about 1.1, and by the way, you were right on. But the COA is probably the better. You know, the
senior exemption, the senior
deduction exemption there for the
senior exemption.
Yeah.
For the senior exemption. So the water sewer retained earnings is that amount of money that's set aside to that they use to maintain the rates where they are, as well as to pay for capital equipment. That's money that comes in over and above the estimate for what they expect to collect.
It's their version of free cash.
Correct. So that's what goes into that number. And this year we're expecting that number to climb to by an additional 493 or roughly $500,000 more, up about 14% over the previous year. So if you see, you can see in terms of the revenue side, our budget is going to climb by about the revenue would be coming in about $3,372,087, or up 3.83%. However, on the expenditure side, where we are right now is that we're coming in actually lower than that. Our expenditures so far are estimated to come in around roughly 2.6% over year from fiscal year to fiscal year, and so therefore we will be under our revenue estimates in that regard. So we're going to be within our budget by doing this work right now.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands that you said it in the beginning, but I want to really drive that point home. That that the budget is fluid until the day we finally get to town meeting and everything is solidified on June 30th. So as of today, this is where we are. But you know, there's still things underneath, like we're still trying to solidify some insurance numbers. We're not quite sure on the state aid, like Bill said. I mean, so things are going to move around a little bit. This isn't chiseled in stone, you know?
No, but those are typically not big moves. Those aren't the categories that would make a big move. And then when we do have these expenditures, one thing the committee may have caught or may not have is, and it came up in some of the conversations with the citizen petition, is sources of revenue get tied to expenses, right? So we identify when we spend money in a category what the source of the money was.
That's correct. And that comes in the form of the motion, actually, at the town meeting. So you'll see where it's, and I think it probably was best defined by the person who wrote the article about the sidewalk, that, they used all the right language initially, but then they put a fixed number there, which really kind of limited the amount of money that could be spent on the project based upon what they submitted. So I was going back to the free cash number, because that always is a number for concern. And that really is the amount of money. Free cash is really what is better known as fund balance. So in other words, if we collect more than we spend, or if we spend less than what we estimate to spend, that money falls to free cash. And obviously the cash is not free, but it's a term that's used in municipal government. But it's better defined as fund balance. And in this particular point, this past few years, we've used around 900,000. This year, we're proposing to use less by a marginal amount by 38,954. That free cash number gets recertified once the fiscal year is closed out. So on June 30th of this year, this current fiscal year closes out. They then Marie and George then work on all the collections to see where we are. They close out all the budgets, and at the end of the day, they then put everything to paper and then submit it to the state for recertification. And once they certify it, we have a new free cash position. Our goal is to try and come in somewhere around $3 to $4 million every year. So right now, as we stand, we're about, with everything considered for town meeting, going before town meeting, this is really important to remember this now, it's the timing piece. That we are going into town meeting utilizing a portion of free cash, 900,000. And also, I'm proposing a very small amount of free cash to use for the capital plan this year, even though it's a sizable capital plan of only about $160,000. So, which is probably one of the slowest amounts of free cash that I can ever remember being spent on a capital plan. We're able to do that this year because we have all the federal money that we need to spend, or we have to turn it back. So we're making good use of that this year. We've managed to leverage that to the best way possible. That will, even in ways that will assist not only the free cash position for the town, but also the retained earnings position of the water and sewer department as well. So we're able to leverage it on both ways.
Yes. Yeah.
So which is, I think, a good thing in the sense that, we've also, you see the OPEB articles included this year too. We'll be back on track with our OPEB payments based upon the way we're working the budget this year again. So the one remaining payment that we still need to make is the one that wasn't made for this current fiscal year, because we didn't carry the money in the budget because we didn't know where the money was going to come from with regards to meals tax. We are estimating that we'll be in better shape for the next fiscal year, and as a result, we've included it in the budget accordingly. This current fiscal year, we are improving actually rather substantially at this point in time from the perspective of meals tax position, but not significantly beyond that. But I will tell you that we still are fairly low in terms of the we're still not back to where we were in terms of revenues from the stadium, because there weren't any concerts held this past summer either. So we want to make sure that we meals tax is a reflection of concerts and shows and things that are held at the stadium as well. So though we do see things coming back, we still want to make sure we have the right amount of money available to use the meals tax appropriately against OPEB and roads as well. So that's that in a nutshell. I hope I've tried to answer every question, every bit of the budget process and where we are currently stand. I think probably the most significant thing to point out is that we're anticipating collecting almost $3.4 million, and we're actually going to only going to spend about 2.3 of that. So which puts us in a much better position.
Questions from the AdCom? So you did mention you target a balance of free cash of $3 to $4 million. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes. We would see that amount show up in probably October, November of this year. So just the timing of that. So right now, going into town meeting, we're going to have a balance in the free cash reserve about just shy of 1.8 million, which is actually about where we were last year. So we haven't lost ground in there, which is a good thing. Right. It's lower than we'd like it to be, but it's not significantly lower in terms of going into town meeting. So I think we didn't lose ground against last year, which was particularly important for us to try, and if we did, it was only marginal loss, if that was the case.
And then you'll certify once it basically gets charged up again, for lack of a better phrase.
That's correct. It'll get recertified again at the end of the fiscal year in the fall by the Department of Revenue. The State Department of Revenue certifies that free cash position for us. After we submit the information to them, they go over every bit of the information, and then they certify us and tell us where we are.
And $3 to $4 million feels reasonable still?
I do.
Okay. It is what we're looking at now, anyway. Yeah.
I know.
As we stand today, yes.
I owned a budget too, man. I know you don't. Yeah. Things happen, but I just wanted to know where it looked like right now.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
That was very helpful. Any other questions from the committee?
Maybe one quick one. In the local receipts detail on the book, there's the category at the bottom called other, and the number runs all over the place. Well, what's in there? Because it looks like it sloped way up and now it's sloping way down.
You could have a number of different things. Like for instance, in one year we had we had gotten money.
The closeout bill of that medical thing.
Right, it was a closeout for the medical. So we had a situation where we actually had about $400,000 in that amount, and what we did was we were able to then reappropriate that back into the use into the town, against some insurance expenses, et cetera. But we were able to. It was a closeout because we were closing out an account where one time many years ago, probably it was over 10, 12 years ago, the town was actually self-insured when it came to workers' comp. The town then went to Maya in part of their program, and so there was still a balance in that account when the town was self-insured. So we carried it from year to year, thinking that we maybe had a few tail claims that might have to be paid out of that account. But once we realized that the tail was gone, the DOR said you got to clear that up. So we would stick it in an account and then just effectively spend it at the end.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm going to thank you for that and wrap that up there, Bill. Just a quick question. You mentioned Capital Committee. What's the status? Are y'all in a position to talk numbers next week?
So first of all, I want to thank Dan for participating in the process this past weekend. We were able to get our way through a fairly substantial list of articles. It was around of items that totaled up around $5.4 million, which comes from several different areas, including Chapter 90, which, by the way, Chapter 90 is up to about $1.2 million this year because of additional state revenue that we're supposed to get. It's been proposed, hasn't been finalized yet, which doubles effectively the amount of money that we have to spend on roads this year, which is a good position. So that's good news for you, Jack. I know you always pay close attention to that one. It's a good one for us. And I think as far as the other items, we have about $2 million of federal ARPA money that came to Foxborough, and another almost another $2 million from the county that we're going to be able to use as well. So we're going to, in the end, it's about $5.4 million. I didn't want to belabor the committee on Saturday with the details of the financing piece, because we ourselves would needed to have a few things clarified before we could actually propose it. But I just met with Marie this afternoon and George around 3 o'clock this afternoon, and we were putting the final touches on that. We should be able to have, and we're going to be meeting with the committee on Monday morning to finalize the financing plan, and then we'll be presenting it to your committee on Wednesday and to the selectmen on Tuesday night.
Perfect. Okay. So that leaves contracts, and I don't need to get into that now because Mike Johns just sent me an email, a fairly
Very
detailed one, and it was.
Yeah.
I saw the link. I'm like, I cannot get to that until after the meeting, and then marijuana. So then, I'd say to the AdCom, we'll be able to start voting next week. We will also be meeting in person next week, which will be delightful.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Anything further from me?
Nothing more from you. I was you can go ahead and go. And thanks again to you and George and Marie for hanging with us.
No, happy to do it, and hope I didn't bore anybody with too much detail. So we cover a lot of ground here tonight.
It's all interesting stuff.
It was all interesting stuff, and I always worry about getting individual residents discouraged when they hear if process is important here, and unfortunately not everybody understands the process. So then when they come in after the fact, after they've already done something, and it really doesn't fit within a round peg or a square peg, so to speak. It makes it difficult for us to figure things out, but that's the nature of the beast that we live in, unfortunately, and it's always hard. So, So
Welcome
unfortunately.
to the town meeting environment. So
That's exactly right. Exactly
All right.
right.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All right.
So
Have a good night.
you
Good night.
too. So for the rest of the AdCom, I already just ran through the remaining articles, and I'll read Mike's email. I don't know so we'll meet in person next week. I will talk to Dan about what articles we can start voting on. I suspect we'll do the budget first, just because it's the most onerous and long part of it, because we'll go department by department for that. And then we'll just figure out the other pieces. So any questions or administrative observations or anything? All right. Thank you for staying this late.
Well, one thing to lead into next week is that it's more of an administrative observation, is that we didn't exactly make the 2.5% limit on the budget year over year that Bill proposed. So if you're looking for a little homework to do for next week, I'm already kind of diving into the budget book on that, but definitely didn't get there. So.
All right.
I would remind you, we've been on local cable access for the last several weeks. Are we going to, and when we go back in person, will we return to no cable access?
I don't have an answer to that. What does the committee think? Do we revote it? So we voted not to.
I mean, I think I was a really big proponent of not having it on cable access. My feelings are still more or less the same, but I'm not as opposed to it as I was originally. I still see the value in having the newer members feel free to really voice their opinions and learn the process as we go. I think that was something that benefited me, for lack of a better term, asking the stupid questions without having your face up on Foxborough Cable Access. Definitely, there's a benefit to that. So I don't think it's a hill I'm willing to die on. I certainly felt that we had some new members at that point that would have benefited from that. I'm not sure how the new members coming on board feel about that now, but there's certainly been a lot of turnover and a lot of, I don't want to say different personalities, but in terms of being a little more outgoing and asking the right questions, I think it's a different group. So just kind of, I think we should vote on it again. I don't think there's any reason to. I think everyone kind of has a feel for what they think, and I think we should just move on with it that week. That way next Wednesday we're prepared.
I wasn't necessarily proposing to vote for it now, because that would be an unagended item. So I don't know. So a little awkward, but we could vote for it. We could do it next week, or you guys could think about it during the week, and then we could switch over then.
So
I mean, that would. Go ahead.
I don't know if Mike and Eric fully know what we were talking about, but last year, before COVID spiked again, we took a vote as to whether or not to allow our meetings to be broadcast. And some people felt uncomfortable with that, but it's I don't think those people are quite here anymore.
And for a little background, they weren't televised prior to COVID. The AdCom was not televised prior to COVID.
Personally, I'm indifferent. I'm not afraid to ask questions regardless.
I'd suggest we throw it up for a vote next week. I don't think we're doing anything controversial or difficult next week, nor will anything be presented next week that's not going to be available recorded in other environments. So I'm also conscious of the fact that someone else will be running the committee in the space of a few months. So I want to be a little thoughtful on precedent. So, all right. Well, that said, does anybody know, is there even a mask situation at the town hall now? I don't even know if it's none. Okay.
None.
No,
Yeah.
not when I was up there this weekend. No.
I feel fully liberated at this point. If someone wants to wear a mask, they absolutely should feel comfortable wearing a mask. I have been masked for a few years, even in very open situations, but the gala room's pretty big. So I'm just giving you due warning. I will not be masked next week, but that if you want to wear one, you absolutely should feel comfortable, because they still do going into some stores and so on. So I don't want anybody to feel pressure to go unmasked.
Yeah, if you do go masked, just make sure you're real close to your mic.
Right.
Yes, or shout.
Yeah.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second from somebody?
Aye.
All right. All in favor, raise your hands, because I think we all have cameras on. Thank you. Thank you for being here late, and thanks for all your hard work. Talk to you next week.